What do you do when you go to get help and you start talking about your story? It's really important to be able to tell your story in a way that feels safe to you, emotionally, spiritually, physically, and all the other ways related to safety that are important to you. There's a term for this, strategic sharing, the process for sharing your lived experiences with others in a way that keeps you safe from negative experiences.
I've shared about opening up to my mom, and she wasn't as receptive to my story, learning she's not someone I can really talk to about these things. So I understand the concept of strategic sharing, not only what to share, but who to share it with.
In those conversations with your mom, I'm sure you learned in certain moments it was okay to share certain things or certain topics, and in other moments it wasn't. So you develop some sense of safety and how to calibrate. When I started working with young people in community and their families, I started spending a lot of time listening. They'd be telling me their stories because they were looking for help. Something would be going on in their life. And there was one particular young man who really taught me a lot about this idea of strategic sharing. This young man was not doing too well in school, was making some choices that weren't in his own favor, but we developed some trust, and he was able to share with me just a little bit about his life. He shared with me about his family history, and his dad had passed away. And so there was this healthy connection, but there was a moment where we were in a big school meeting. Somebody asked him, "How are you doing?" And he started sharing as if it was just me and him in the room. And at that moment, I felt worried for him that he was sharing too much. It was this epiphany that I could be doing more when I was helping them open up. How much should I share and when? And is that always in my best interest?
It's important to learn to share your story, practicing your story. What are things you need to talk about? But also, what components do you want to put into it? How detailed do you want to get? How much do you want to go into how you're feeling about those things or how you felt about those things? How those feelings might have shifted over time? All those things matter so much. Your story, it's not one fixed narrative. There's lots of different ways to tell it. There's lots of different perspectives. There's lots of different depths in which to tell it. So you get to decide with whom you want to share it, how deep you want to go, what details you want to share. And that can change over time. It will change over time. There's no question that as you share your story, things will shift inside you. Certain things will get easier to share. Some things might not be important to share at all later. There's a real fluidity to your story.
Wow. I really appreciate where you took that, using this on your healing journey, recognizing in one moment you may be in one place and then the next moment you may be in another. What I hope for folks when they're starting to learn how to share their feelings is also developing a sense of awareness. This is where I was and this is where I am now. That's a really neat way to think about strategic sharing. Sometimes it's seen as a way of protecting young people in sharing their stories, but it also can be part of growth. You might tell your story one way, and then you might consciously choose to tell your story differently over time for any number of different reasons. One of those reasons might be safety, but it could be a lot of other different reasons. Let's start with some simple ways to think about strategic sharing, what it is and how to incorporate it in your healing journey. Having a sense of your personal boundaries. How much or how little you want to share in any given situation is really important. Knowing how and practicing setting boundaries with different people in your life is also really important. In my own life, I use strategic sharing in therapy sessions or when I'm reaching out to people for help. I was 35-ish. My dad had just passed away, and I really needed to go to therapy. I wasn't doing too well. But I really had this fear of sharing too much, or if I share something, is it going to be bad? And that was odd as a mental health professional. I knew what I was going to share and where I was going to be in those first few months. This therapist was really skilled and really open. They whittled down my boundaries, and I will be forever thankful to them. That helped get me to the help that I needed, having those boundaries.
You did more work up front than I did going into therapy. I went in very emergent. What do we do now? Back to that auto mechanic model of I'm here, fix me. You're the professional, you figure it out. To come in with a plan, that's wise. Going into any situation, having a plan is a good idea. Even if you don't follow the plan, just having thought through it and knowing what you want to do and why you want to do it, that can help you respond better in the moment.
I hope that might be helpful to somebody who's not sure. Or is that normal to feel guarded or worried about what you might share? And I would say absolutely it's normal, even for folks like us who talk a lot about this and are really interested in mental health.
That makes me think of this idea of self-judgment. Something in my story makes me ashamed or embarrassed, so I don't want to talk about that. I don't want to share that. That's normal. Hopefully you can get past that, because that's the key to getting to acceptance and closure on some of these things that you're carrying around with you, is to be able to share them with another human being. It's normal to judge ourselves for things that we've done, or maybe even things that were done to us, things that have happened to us. People who grow up in poverty and don't have money, they go hungry. They can be ashamed by that, or they don't have money for new clothes, and so they have to wear hand-me-downs. These are things that are just situational. You can feel bad for that. You can feel less than. That's normal, but it's not true. These feelings of shame and embarrassment, they're valid feelings. If there's one person you can share this with, it should be a therapist. They are trained over many, many years and thousands of hours to hear stories like yours and not be judgmental, but open to it and accepting. These are all things you should look for in the therapist. If any of these aren't there, that's a red flag and get out of the room if it's not working for you. If being able to cross that chasm to say, ooh, I don't really want to share this because I'm embarrassed or I'm ashamed by this, but to be able to say it anyway, that can be a huge relief when the person on the other side just listens and says, okay, and how are you feeling about that? And let's talk through that. They're going to continue the conversation. It's not going to stop. It's not going to be like, I can't work with you anymore because you're not worthy. It's another part of the process of working through these things.
These strategies for telling a story, it's to get you there. It's to get the person needing help in front of that professional or the person who wants to help. Sometimes there is a shame or a worry we carry from our past or our history or our trauma that we think somebody is going to find unacceptable or they can't possibly help me with this thing. We all have a feeling of that in one way or the other. Maybe we're in the middle of sharing and all of a sudden we just have this wave of guilt. I've shared too much. I don't know if I can continue. Doing some light thinking of what happens if that does happen. I'm having a hard time sharing because I'm feeling a lot of shame. Or what if the provider has a response that feels negative to you or is negative? You feel like maybe you've shared too much. It can be good to think about what you might do. Take a step back and take some deep breaths. Ask for a few minutes to go outside, because with a therapist, they're going to be very open to coping skills, self-care, just taking a moment, knowing that we can do that we have that agency, like we've talked about before. So it all kind of ties together, right? We're trying to weave this experience of getting help together.
It's okay to just stop at any moment during sharing your story. If it's not feeling right, even mid-sentence, if you can't keep going with this, just take a moment. Excuse yourself to go to the bathroom. Make an excuse. I need a drink of water, whatever it is. Gather your thoughts. If it's not feeling right, if it's not flowing, that's okay. You're just not there. It's just not jiving between you and the other person. That's okay. You can just stop. You don't have to keep going. You don't have to finish a story. There's no requirement that once you start going, you have to continue or finish.
I love that, Dave. And I really love the way you said it. It is okay to stop. And you do have that control. Maybe you're at the dinner table with your mom and you're trying to weave together a very delicate conversation. I'm sure you're telling yourself sometimes, woo, now's not the time, or maybe another day, or maybe not ever. Those are the strategic decisions we have to make. You also have the right to say no, or not today, or later. I think that position of agency and power actually helps us continue, but knowing you have that choice when you get help or you're seeking help can help us feel like it's okay to continue and it's safe to continue.
You might be judging yourself or bringing shame upon yourself because someone in your life, someone you care about, maybe someone very close, your mom, your dad, trusted friend, has some judgment. I'll just throw out as an example, if someone is struggling with their sexuality, might be gay, and they see their father react strongly in negative ways towards people who don't align with traditional sexuality, that can make you feel like you're wrong. You want your values to be aligned with the people who are around you, your tribe, essentially. You grow up in a family and you see their values and you want to live by those values. But if something inside you is not aligned with that, there's a tension. That's another good reason to go and share it with someone else. One of the myths I had was, why would a stranger care? Why would they understand? Why would they even help? It's really trying to get an alternate perspective outside of this family environment that you're in. Someone who doesn't have any vested interest in any of the relationships, and they can give you an honest appraisal of where you are. If you are struggling with something and someone in your life is judging you for it, or you know that they would judge you if you opened up about it, talking with someone like a therapist or a friend, a peer who has this skill set is just a good way to not only process your feelings, but also how you might approach this person. And maybe the answer is never. Maybe the answer is we can never talk about this with this person. That's fine. Things can always change. Things can open up. I've known of stories. I know you could probably tell me dozens of stories of people who say, oh, I can never talk to my mom or dad about this thing. Then a year or two or a decade later, things change. Even if it's no at the moment, it's never no always. You can always come back to it.
You're really talking about the state of emotional awareness we want to start developing and holding. That gives us a foundation, like a baseline. So then we know, oh, this is my baseline with this person and I'm feeling pretty good. I can be pretty open. But maybe if you're having a bit of a tough day or things are going on for you in the background, it might relate to how you share your story. Is as things come up for us, maybe we share a little less. Maybe we're a little more careful. We're aware of where our triggers are as well. If we're worried about being judged, we preface it, or we find language, or we find ways of sharing that are vulnerable enough to give people a sense of where we are and what we need, but also that we don't leave the conversation feeling like we shared too much. That self-awareness piece, knowing and sitting with yourself and going into that conversation, being really honest, like, I am not doing okay today. This week has been really tough. The person that you're talking to, they're open, they're welcoming. That's what they're there to do, is to receive you in that moment. We wanted to share a definition of strategic sharing, determining in advance what information you want to share about yourself that you feel comfortable sharing publicly or privately, like in a therapy session. What is appropriate to talk about, and what would you want others to learn from your experiences, and also thinking about your goals inside of that experience. So carefully choosing what you say is really important, especially if we're going to be sharing it online. In a private therapy session, I want to give them enough information to know how to support me, but also develop trust. I'm definitely going to tell them about my family background to a certain extent. I might tell them where I'm from. I might tell them my cultural identity and my sexual identity. I'll tell them what work I do and some of my life experiences. That's about as comfortable as I feel early on, maybe within the first few months staying in that realm. I might bring small problems to the table within the first few months, but also this is me coming into a therapeutic situation. I wasn't in a crisis moment. I was coming in to kind of check in because I could feel things were getting a little bit heated for me. So that's just my own personal story and way. It's not to recommend that to anybody else as a template or a script, but those are the kind of things I think about when I'm going to somebody for help.
We talked about bringing in screeners or questionnaires that you might have gone through, a more structured way to bring things in, like HEXACO I mentioned. There's also the ACEs screener, adverse childhood experiences. That can be a way to share, I've had trauma in my household growing up, without talking about specifics. It talks about things like verbal abuse or physical abuse. And maybe you just want to say, yes, I've experienced that, without going into the details. That can be a good way to set the stage for, there might be stories on this coming later. And also just to see how they respond to that. You want to share a little bit and be sensing how this person is receptive and how warm they are and how open they are and how non-judgmental, compassionate they are. Sharing something high level. I've had some generational trauma. I experienced trauma in the household growing up. That can allow you to feel comfortable enough to open up later to talk more about the specifics.
Some of the benefits of strategic sharing, hoping that it helps you, somebody you know, feel more comfortable. Reduce that feeling of stigma when you reach out for help, and know a little bit more about what you might want to say and do when you get to that moment of seeking help. It can make that moment feel a little less scary, but also could be a little more effective. You might share information, or you might feel like yourself, so that you connect with that person and start building trust, maybe just a little more quickly. This ability to self-advocate, knowing that you have boundaries. There's things that you do want to talk about. There's things that you don't want to talk about. So when you get to those moments, you have some sense of response and maybe a little strategy. Understanding strategic sharing can be seen as a part of building your agency. Having strategies for how you want to share about yourself when seeking support can help us get support we need in a way that feels safe to us. Finding ways to seek and sustain your healing journey are really important. Building your toolkit slowly requires patience and self-compassion. So take your time and be gentle with yourself. We're always learning new ways of doing things. One of my favorite quotes by Buddha says, "You yourself, as much as anybody in the entire universe, deserve your love and affection. Whatever words we utter should be chosen with care." I'm Jules.
And I'm Dave.
Thank you so much for joining us today. Our goal is simple. We want everyone in the world to live a happy and healthy life, and that starts with you.